Welcome back, guys. Breakup Brad here. And today I want to tackle one of the biggest fears that people have after a breakup. Now, I'm sure you've already heard about no contact. Maybe you're even thinking about trying it yourself, or you're in no contact right now. But the question that's haunting you is probably, what if my ex forgets about me during no contact? And I hear this literally every single day from my coaching clients. And honestly, I totally understand why it freaks people out. Because if you're in the painful stage after a breakup, where your heart is still raw, your emotions are all over the place, the idea of your ex slowly erasing you from their memory sounds unbearable. But here's the truth. And I say this as somebody who's been doing breakup coaching for over 15 years now with thousands of clients from all over the world. No contact will not make your ex forget about you. If anything, it's actually going to do the exact opposite. In fact, in the majority of cases, the vast majority of cases, no contact is the single most effective way to ensure that your ex can't stop thinking about you. And I'll explain exactly why that happens, plus a few very, very important exceptions to that, so that by the end of this video, you feel completely confident about sticking to the plan and not giving in to the urge to reach out to your ex. So right after a breakup, your ex isn't seeing you clearly. Their mental picture of you is distorted. It's colored by stress, tension, guilt, and frustration. Even if you were an amazing partner, those memories are temporarily buried under the emotional fallout of a breakup. Your ex might be angry, exhausted, or just mentally done. And that is completely normal. But here's the critical part. Emotions fade. Always. The human brain can't sustain high emotional intensity forever. It's really physically impossible. The adrenaline, the cortisol, the stress hormones that flood your system during and after a breakup, they all have a half-life. They wear off with time. And when you stay in touch with your ex during that window, when you text them, check in, try to be friendly, or even just try to explain yourself, you're not helping those emotions fade. You're actually reinforcing them. Every time you appear in your ex's life, you remind them of the breakup and you reinforce that negative emotional association. But when you go no contact, on the other hand, something really interesting starts to happen. You stop triggering the bad stuff. You remove yourself from the cycle of stress and negativity. And as those emotions fade away, your ex's mind starts to rewire the way that it thinks about you. Think of no contact like hitting the reset button on your ex's emotional hard drive. At first, they're going to feel relief. And that's actually a good thing. Don't panic when that happens. Most dumpers feel an initial moment of relief when they first separate from their partner. But it's not that they're happy to lose you. It's that they're really decompressing. The relationship had built up tension, and now that tension's been released. So really, they enjoy a brief sense of emotional freedom. But that phase definitely does not last. And once your ex's stress hormones stabilize and their life starts to quiet down, that's when a void opens up. All the little daily interactions, the morning texts, the shared jokes, the casual check-ins, all those things suddenly disappear. And that is when their brain starts to crave you again. Not because of logic or nostalgia yet, but because of emotional habit. Humans are wired for routine and attachment. Your ex had developed hundreds of tiny micro habits that were centered around you. And now those habits are being interrupted, cold turkey. And that is when curiosity creeps in. They start wondering what you're doing, who you're with, and whether you're still thinking about them. And that curiosity leads to nostalgia. And nostalgia leads to missing you. Now let's debunk one of the biggest myths in breakup psychology, and that is the idea that out of sight, out of mind applies to romantic relationships, because it really doesn't. In fact, neuroscience shows that separation often intensifies emotional fixation, especially when the attachment bond hasn't been fully replaced. And when someone loses their source of emotional comfort, which in this case for your ex was you, their brain releases dopamine and oxytocin withdrawal signals that mirror mild addiction symptoms. And that's why so many exes say they feel off or, strangely empty in the weeks after a breakup. And the more abruptly the separation happens, the stronger that withdrawal response. And that is in large part why no contact works. It leverages that natural psychological withdrawal in your favor. By going quiet, you give your ex the space to feel the loss of you. And only through that loss can attraction and longing start to rebuild. So rather than worrying that they'll forget you, what you should really be asking is, how can I make the most of this period to become even more attractive while they're starting to miss me? Because honestly, that is really where the real power of no contact lies. Now, you might not realize it yet, but memory is actually extremely unreliable. We like to think that our recollections are accurate snapshots of the past, but in reality, they're constantly shifting stories that our brains rewrite based on emotion. And when your ex is freshly out of the relationship, their memories of you are filtered through negative emotion. They're focused on the reasons for the breakup, the fights, the frustrations, the moments that hurt. But as weeks go by without contact, those negative emotional associations start to fade. Now, psychologists call this emotional reframing. It means that when your ex thinks of you a month or two from now, they're far more likely to recall the warm and the comforting memories, the laughter, the chemistry and companionship, rather than the arguments or disappointments. You're no longer an emotional threat in their mind. You're more of a comforting memory. And that is when they start to miss you, not just out of habit, but out of genuine longing for the good version of you that they once loved. So in a very real sense, the longer you stay quiet, the more your ex's subconscious mind begins to paint you in a positive light. Now, let's talk about a common scenario. What happens if you see your ex during no contact? Now, this can happen by accident. Maybe you bump into them downtown, or you work at the same office, you have mutual friends, and you end up at the same party. Now, when this happens, a lot of people just panic. They freeze, overthink everything, or worse, they act cold and distant. But here's the key. You want to leave a positive emotional impression, not a negative or neutral one. So if you do run into your ex, your job is simple. Be friendly, be confident, and keep it light. You definitely don't want to act like you're angry or bitter, but you also don't want to seem overeager or emotional. Smile, make eye contact, be polite, maybe share a little joke or a light comment, and then, excuse yourself after a minute or two. The goal is really to leave them with one powerful thought. Wow, they seem different, happier. I wonder what they've been up to. And honestly, that single thought can plant a seed of attraction and curiosity that grows in your ex's mind over time. Remember, people don't miss what feels available. They miss what feels scarce. So even in those short, unavoidable encounters, you're reinforcing that scarcity and leaving your ex wanting more. Now, on the other side of the coin, what if your ex is the one who can't seem to stop contacting you during no contact? Maybe they text you asking how you're doing. Maybe they check in with, hey, just wondering how you've been. Or maybe they send something, totally random, like a meme or a photo of a place you went together. Now, this is a very good sign, but it's also a dangerous one if you don't handle it correctly. So here's what you need to do. First, don't reply instantly. Take your time, at least a few hours, maybe even a full day. You're not ignoring them, but you're signaling that your world doesn't revolve around their attention anymore. And when you do respond, keep it really casual, short, and positive. You want to show them that you're doing fine without them. Upbeat, confident, maybe even a little mysterious. And what you definitely don't want to do is fall into any kind of emotional conversations, reminisce about the relationship, or act like their therapist. All of that is just going to kill attraction. Your ex has to feel that you're no longer available for emotional support, because that's what creates the all or nothing contrast. You're either together or you're not. There's no middle ground where you play their emotional safety net while they move on. And if you maintain that boundary, politely but firmly, your value in their mind skyrockets. Now, I do want to mention one important exception, because this is something that can trip people up. If your relationship had already been emotionally over for months, meaning you'd fully drifted apart long before the breakup, then strict no contact might not be your best move. Here's what I mean. If you and your ex hadn't been close, you hadn't been affectionate or emotionally connected for a long time, then their brain has really already adjusted to life without you. The breakup in that case wasn't really a shock. It was more like confirming something that had already been true for a while. And in that kind of situation, disappearing completely doesn't necessarily create longing. It often just continues the existing pattern of disconnection. Now, that doesn't mean you start chasing them or trying to force contact. It just means you need to take a slightly different approach, one where you slowly rebuild emotional investment before cutting them off. Let's shift gears for a moment and talk about something that's often overlooked. What you do during no contact matters almost as much as what you don't do. And no contact isn't just about ignoring your ex. It's about using that time to rebuild your own confidence, your own independence, and emotional strength. So when you start going to the gym again, you hanging out with friends, trying new hobbies, just generally living your life fully, that energy radiates outward. It shows through in your posture, in your tone, even your online presence. When your ex inevitably checks your social media, which they almost certainly will, they'll see a version of you that's thriving, that's confident and happy. And that is incredibly attractive because now, instead of remembering the anxious, emotional version of you from the breakup, they're seeing somebody who looks like they've leveled up. And that is how you turn no contact from a passive waiting game into an active reattraction strategy. Now, let's be honest. No contact is hard. It goes against really every instinct you have. You want to reach out. You want to fix things. You want reassurance that your ex still cares. But every time you break no contact out of fear, you're handing your ex the power. You're showing them that they still control your emotions. Faith, on the other hand, is attractive. It's calm. It's self-assured. But when you stick to no contact, you're silently communicating something really powerful. You're saying, I know my worth. I know that if this relationship is meant to work, it will. But I'm not going to chase something that's not ready for me yet. And that mindset shift alone changes the entire dynamic. Suddenly, your ex feels that loss. They feel that space. They start to question their decision. And when they do reach out, and they probably will, you'll be in a position of strength rather than desperation. Look, I know how scary it feels to go silent and risk losing someone you love. But in almost every case, no contact is not about losing your ex. It's about giving them the space to realize your value again. They will not forget you. In fact, you'll be on their mind far more than you realize. They're going to replay old moments. They're going to scroll through old photos, and they're going to wonder what you're doing now that you're no longer available. And as time goes along, the negative memories are going to fade and the positive ones are going to start to take center stage. So be patient, stay strong, focus on becoming the best version of yourself, because that is the person that your ex is going to start missing. And eventually, that's the person they're going to want back. Now, if you're struggling to figure out how to apply no contact in your specific situation, for example, if you live together, work together, share kids together, I would be happy to help. Just head over to breakupbrad.com/coaching and sign up for my one-on-one coaching. When you sign up, I'll walk you through exactly what to do based on your unique situation. And if you haven't already, take my free quiz at breakupbrad.com/quiz. It only takes a couple of minutes and it'll tell you your chances of getting your ex back, plus some personalized next steps to increase your odds. That is it for now. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Please hit like, subscribe, and leave me a comment below. I do read all of them and I try to respond to as many as I can. Stay strong, stay patient, and remember, silence isn't the enemy. Sometimes it's the most powerful move that you can make. See you in the next video.